Dr. Floyd. Dr. Floyd. Dr. Arlov has encountered some strange data coming from Europa. I will send Max down with a pod.
I wouldn't do that.
Oh, really?
If you want to send a pod down there, send an unmanned one.
Hey, a piece of pie.
Cake. Piece of cake.
Cake, yes.
2010, the year we make contact, is a sequel to 2001 A Space Odyssey. And many people, I think, don't know that 2001, the legendary Stanley Kubrick movie, has a sequel, or they know about it and they think, or they seen it and they consider it to be let's say a bad sequel to the masterpiece, or an inferior product to the masterpiece. And to be sincere, it's pretty hard to compare another movie to a Stanley Kubrick movie. The same problem arises in 2019 when we had Doctor Sleep, a sequel to the book and the Stanley Kubrick movie The Shining, which had the same problem that a lot of people were like, it's an inferior sequel to the masterpiece. And yeah, The Shining and 2001 A Space Odyssey and Spartacus and Eyes Wide Shut, and come on, it's very, very difficult to surpass a master of the caliber of Stanley Kubrick, which gave us A Clockwork Orange and Barry Lyndon. And you have to understand that in 1968, when 2001 A Space Odyssey happened, it was groundbreaking. Its special effects were amazing, and even today on a Blu-ray, if you see 2001, you're like, oh my god, how did they do that? How can those special effects look more amazing and more real than special effects we have today? Then they look more real than CGI we have today. And yeah, I have to agree with that. And I saw 2001, I think, like 5 years ago. I'm not really sure. And when I saw it, I was very impressed by it visually, but it kind of lacks in a story. It's more atmospheric than story driven. I would say the movie, it's more visual, and in some points of view I would say that sci-fi, the best representation of sci-fi would be in a visual medium. It would be more interesting to see something visual, but I'm also a story person. And when I saw 2001 Space Odyssey, it was like an 8 out of 10 for me. I want to re-see it because maybe now I can understand it better than I understood it back then. But now let's return to 2010. 2010 is like a direct sequel to 2001. They specify that the movie happens 9 years later than the original movie, although chronologically 2010, the year we make contact, was filmed in 84, and it's very much an 80s movie, from the fashion, the actors, the special effects. And as I saw this movie, I kept making jokes that this didn't happen in 2010, and this doesn't look like 2010. And interesting enough, we are now in 2020, so I'm making like a review to a movie that should have happened 10 years ago. So this is like an interesting thing. And I want to say that it was like a pretty hard challenge to make a sequel to one of the most influential movies that was ever made. And the director of 2010, Peter Hyams, took like a very hard challenge on him. And this guy, maybe many people don't know of him by his name, but he has been around since the 80s to the late 90s. He directed the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie Time Cop, and he directed Outland, another sci-fi space movie with Sean Connery, and the guy directed Arnold Schwarzenegger in The End of Days. So this guy was there, but sadly, I think he hasn't he hasn't directed that many high-profile movies lately. From what I see, there is an Outland remake planned, but please stop it with the remakes. What are they gonna do? Another CGI movie that has nothing in originality to it? They should stop with the remakes. Maybe only make remakes to movies that were interesting in concepts, but the execution wasn't that good. Outland would kind of be in that category, but at the same time, they don't have that much to do with the premise of that movie. And 2010 tries to pick up 9 years later where 2001 left off, and the guys who Roy Scheider is one of those actors that I knew about him, and I was sad to hear that he passed away. I think back in 2008. So he wouldn't have even he wasn't even alive in 2010. And the cast in this picture, The Year We Made Contact, is I really liked it. Like Roy Scheider, as I said before, and Helen Mirren, which I was so happy to see the beautiful and talented Helen Mirren, to see her in a older movie. And we also had like John Lithgow in this movie, and Bob Balaban. But I would say that the main centerpiece of this movie is not the actors, but I would say the immersion and the sets. They did a very good job, in my opinion, realizing the space station sets. The movie is more of a hard sci-fi than how would I call the 2001's Space Odyssey? I'd call it more of an philosophical space movie, 2001, a more intellectual movie with symbolisms, and while 2010 is more scientific, more cold, and it tries to represent space and space station. And I really liked the design of the space station that they used, the Discovery 2. And I liked the idea of this is an interesting thing that this movie did. They tried solving one of the political problems that kind of still exists to this day, the collaboration between Americans and Russians. And that, in my opinion, is something that they did very good. They were like, let's pass over the political issues and try to think like scientists and try to work for the better good of humankind. And that's themes that I really liked in this movie. Like, for example, John Lithgow's character at one point becomes a very good friend with one of the Russian space station members, and those were very good scenes that I liked a lot. And also, I liked seeing models. I have to admit that some of the special effects that they had back then were they looked even better back then than nowadays. They use a lot of CGI, and those practical special effects I think were kind of better. And the only way I think they could improve now special effects, it would be that they would use, in my opinion, still they would use models, but they would enhance them with CGI. Also, I would say that I kind of I kind of understand why sci-fi movies are rarely made and are harder to make, because you have to invest a lot of money in doing those sci-fi backdrops than if you would do like a family movie or a period drama. Then you would have those backgrounds that are already available for you to film. But it's harder to make a space movie, and they did an amazing job in my opinion. The director Peter Iams really did a very good job, but if he was even the screenwriter for this movie, and he did a, the best job he could do, especially when doing a sequel to such a masterpiece as 2001. And I liked a lot the acting. I liked a lot the callbacks to the older movie. Some of the cons I have against this movie, I'd say that the soundtrack wasn't remarkable. They used some of the songs they had in 2001, but they didn't bring something new or remarkable to this movie. But still, visually, it's very well made. If you're a fan of space operas, in my opinion, it's a very good one. Especially, I think since 2000, the 2010s, we had of like a resurgence of sci-fi with Gravity, and then The Martian and Interstellar and Ad Astra. We had like a lot of space movies, and this movie was like, I could see that it also had like influences from Alien, but at the same time I would say that from some points of view you could say that it even influenced movies such as Aliens. So it's kind of sad that 2010 was kind of forgotten by time, especially when compared to the Stanley Kubrick movie, and probably it got destroyed probably when it came first out by critics. But in my opinion, it's a forgotten movie that it should get a resurgence. And who knows, maybe more people will find out about this movie and watch it and give it a second chance. You shouldn't compare a movie to such a master as Stanley Kubrick was. You should try to watch it as a singular movie for its technical things, for its story, for its flow, because it had a very good flow in my opinion. The actors did an amazing job, and the connections that it did to 2001, in my opinion, were really well done. Some of the themes were I couldn't I liked the themes, the themes of diplomacy and that we should think about peace. Those I liked. Also, I have a funny story to say. I don't want to spoil the movie, but there was a scene when an explosion happened, and when that explosion happened, my apartment started trembling, and I thought for a moment. I was so drawn into this movie that I thought for a moment that the vibrations from the movie affected the apartment, but then I realized that it was an earthquake that was happening in the moment when we had this explosion in this movie. So that was like an amazing experience that enhanced this movie. All in all, I would give this movie an 8 out of 10. Thank you for listening.